VikesNow, Dustin Baker, the Victory Monday edition, Week 1, off to a good start. Minnesota goes 1-0, downing the rival Packers in Kevin O'Connell's opening salvo as head coach. That's the high-level paragraph description. This show will be various items, observations, takeaways about the event itself. I tweeted a bunch of these, also wrote about on Vikings territory, so this is the video aspect, breaking them down, some context, some nuance of things that I observed there in section 314 with my wife's son and my wife's best friend. It was a marvelous day in general, and 23-7 against the Packers. You can't ask for more than that for a team led by Aaron Rodgers. Foremost, it was the first time since 2001 that the Vikings beat an Aaron Rodgers or Brett Favre-led Packers team by more than 14 points. The last time that happened was October 21st, 2001. So that should tell you something right there, that if it felt different, statistically, it was for good reason. All right, let's start the list. I have items that I'm going to talk about. Some of them are in the weeds. Some of them are high level. The first is indeed high level. This win generated positivity and legitimacy for the 2022 Minnesota Vikings. Why does that matter? Well, there's some of you, somewhat rightfully so, that wanted these sons of bitches to rebuild. They laughed at you and said, no thanks. We're keeping the two highest paid players in Kirk Cousins and Neil Hunter, and we are just going to run it back with the core superstars while fortifying the roster with defensive additions like Jordan Hicks and Zadarius Smith and a draft class of 10 new dudes. So, when they come out and beat the Packers in Week 1, it shows you that at least for a single week, the plan was correct, because they very easily could have got shellacked. It's happened before by Aaron Rodgers, but for a out-of-the-gate moment for Kevin O'Connell to win in his building Week 1 against the most hated rival adds legitimacy to the notion that this team wasn't crazy far off from being relevant. A lot of you didn't want to hear that because you were sick of Kirk Cousins and 8-9 football, 7-9 football. He can't get it done. Let's move on to Kellen Mond or Kenny Pickett or some other dude. Well, we'll see how the rest of the 17 weeks play out, but right now was a perfect opening sniff of what the team can become. So, we spent how many months? 8 months in this honeymoon phase of O'Connell. This could have fell flat on its face. You never know what you're going to get with a first-year head coach. It could have been all sunshine and rainbows and political speak, and then, no substantiation, no basis for, being any good. Well, that was incorrect. They beat the Packers 23-7, flirted with a shutout for a while there, and I think if nothing else, at least to inspire you for the rest of the season, the team has it in there to be good. Here's why I say that. Good teams can rebound from Week 1 losses, but you hardly ever see a lousy team beat a good team, and then that was just it. It was a complete outlier. So I think these Vikings are here to stay. I've been saying it for, my goodness, how long we've had the show? 6 months, that I believe in the efficacy of this plan, the strategy of trying to, make it like the Rams East. Kirk Cousins, they did a whole show, the last show, about Stafford and he being so similar. I think that it would be too strange for this to be, remember that Week 1 game when they looked great and then they ended up finishing 4-13 or some shit like that? I don't think that's on the way. So adding to that legitimacy argument that this win felt like for real. There are a lot of things that I would consider the most impressive takeaway, but I think when you look back at the box score, at the recap, if you were there in attendance or sitting there at the house with your family, that Kevin O'Connell's decision to go for it on 4th and goal on the first drive like that changed everything about how the 2022 Vikings operate as opposed to years past. I'm here to tell you that if the Zimmer Vikings were still in effect, that 4th and goal from the 5, it would have been debated. We wouldn't have known what was going to happen. I think ultimately Zimmer would have gone for it too. But then you probably would have had some rink-a-dink play that Clint Kubiak dialed up, and you were like, oh, God, what was that? And I don't think he'd quite run it up the middle, but I think it would be some underwhelming play call that would have been like, oh, God. Either that or he would have settled for the 3 points. But the split-second decision, the absolute no-brainer of it all for the Vikings to go for it, to get the playoff, and to have it be just perfect to Justin Jefferson was a welcome to Minnesota moment for Kevin O'Connell, and it, apropos, bookended the Mike Zimmer era, in my opinion. Like, it just all happened so fast. Like, I remember thinking, all right, are they going to go for this? They pretty much have to. And before I could finish my thought, they were already lining up, and I was like, oh boy, this feels different. So I've said to you guys multiple times throughout the offseason, like, watch these games, watch this training camp. How does it feel? Well, that was a vibe, a moment, an aura, a feeling that this feels different. After that, by no compliment to the Vikings, Christian Watson, who was gift-wrapped to the Packers by the Vikings, dropped a surefire touchdown mere minutes after the play I just referenced with Jefferson scoring on the opening drive. And that was a fatality for the Packers because you're walking nimbly through life without Devontae Adams. Rodgers is still MVP guy, throws a perfect pass to Christian Watson, who just burned Patrick Peterson, and the guy just drops it. No wonder he was pissed. That would have, I believe, absolutely changed the dichotomy of the game. It would have made it another haymaking slugfest, kind of like we saw last year in the second half of Vikings-Packers at US Bank Stadium. But Watson dropped it, and that set the tone for the rest of the afternoon. I'm sure people in Wisconsin rolled their eyes, and I love it, but it was inexcusable by Watson to drop that, especially, how O'Connell had his welcome to Minnesota moment. Well, for Watson, that could have been his welcome to the NFL moment, but he point-blank dropped it. Not my problem. Next, I think throughout the first half and even a little bit in the second half, the chunk yards that the Packers were accumulating were concerning. It felt like, okay, what are we doing here? And I kept waiting. I'm still one of those cynics like you in the heat of the moment in those games, especially when the Vikings start to blow a lead. I kept thinking, all right, they're able to move the ball. Rodgers is eventually going to strike, and we're going to have problems. However, when this was all said and done, we're recording a show on YouTube the day after. The Vikings held them to 7 points. Therefore, it's okay to observe that there's things to clean up, and I'm sure they're doing that in Egan. But you should not be complaining about anything on the defense because they held Rodgers and the Packers to 7 points. You can't ask for more than that. So this is my warning to you, or my recommendation. Don't nitpick. It was 23-7, week one with a new head coach against the Packers. What more could you ask for? So yeah, although the chunk yards were like, this doesn't feel like the 2017 Zimmer defense. Defenses rarely do that ever. Next, another thing that stood out to me in the second quarter was after the goal line stand, which was almost equivalent to O'Connell's decision to go for it on offense. I think the best way to say it would just be the oomph that it took to stand up that team on the goal line. They went down, a nice offensive drive, and then they settled for 3. They had another fourth down situation where I was like, all right, well, he's probably gonna go for this too. But no, they trotted out Joseph for an easy field goal, and I think that should indicate to you that there will be some, bringing this back in. They're not gonna go for it on fourth down all the time. They took the easy 10-0 lead, which you can debate whether or not that was the right decision. But I don't think it will necessarily be the Wild West all of the time on fourth down. And the election to go for the field goal there proved it. So rein it back in a little bit. Yes, you have an offensive-minded head coach who's younger than me that's going to pass the ball over the field, feed Justin Jefferson. But it's not quite like you playing video games at age 14 where you just go for it on fourth down every time. Speaking of Jefferson, a lot of folks, especially fantasy football brains, talked about Justin Jefferson in the Cooper Kupp role. And the Cooper Kupp role is not just a sheer target load that says a Randy ratio. We're going to give this dude blah, blah, blah number of targets per game. It's the way that they use Jefferson. I'm here to report that the way that they used Jefferson yesterday was very similar to how Kupp was used in Los Angeles. So indeed, the Cooper Kupp role is on the docket, but it's not necessarily a guaranteed workload. It's the way that you get him open, and then subsequently the quarterback finds him. And he over and over found Jefferson wide the hell open throughout the game. They wouldn't put Jair Alexander on Jefferson. I don't know why. They always put him on Thielen. Nobody cares. It worked to the tune of 9 catches, 184 yards, and 2 touchdowns for Mr. Jefferson. But the Cooper Kupp role is indeed here. You just have to tweak how you think about it in your head. It's the way he's schematically used that's akin to Cooper Kupp. Another one of my favorite parts of this game was Greg Joseph in general. In the, was that second quarter or third quarter? I think third quarter. So we talked about this a couple weeks ago, and O'Connell talked about this a couple weeks ago, that based on the way Joseph had been kicking in training camp and then kicking in preseason, especially in Denver's thin air, this son of a bitch can hit from 60-something yards. And O'Connell said that correspondingly, we're extending our field goal range, the way that we think about football. And that meant, I think, that at the time, when O'Connell took the job, Joseph was probably a dude you trot out from about 55 or an emergency 56, 57. But now I'm convinced that in a decent weather stadium or a glass palace in Minnesota, he's going to get chances from 60 and beyond because he's hitting them. And it's noteworthy because I was there, and ordinarily, when a kicker, I don't care what his name is, if it's Carlson, Forbath, Bailey, Walsh to an extent, and now Joseph, even last year, when a kicker comes up, we're all like, oh God, what sweet hell is going to happen now? When Joseph trotted out there for the 56-yarder, which tied a Vikings record, it was like, all right, let's do this. And folks were looking around, he's going to hit it. And then he did, flat out. Perfect, 56 yards. So suddenly, in a very unspoken way, over the course of a spring and summer, I believe the Vikings feel they have a kicker who has the leg of a Tucker or a Butker or a Carlson, and he's going to be trusted and utilized as such. I'm not going to declare Joseph as a top 10 kicker because I have to see a prolonged sample size, but the way that they have faith in him, you should expect all long field goals to be on the agenda because they have that trust, and it seemingly came out of nowhere in a single summer. It's a glorious thing. Aaron Rodgers authored 2 turnovers, and that always shows your defense is doing something right. It also pissed him off like none other, which you love to see. And I'm sure they'll recover and be fine. But anytime that you're getting Rodgers flustered, Zimmer did it a lot. It didn't always translate to wins, but Zimmer was basically about 500 against Rodgers when Zimmer had his quarterback in tow. But they forced turnovers, and if you can force turnovers on Rodgers, you can do it against any human in the world. So put that in your mental filing bank. 3 penalties. That's all the Vikings committed, and if I'm not mistaken, they ranked 26th in the NFL last year for most penalties, so that would be 7th worst. And if only for a Sunday or a week 1 game, they only had 3. We'll take it. You should hang the banner, have the parade, because last year the penalties got out of control. In Zimmer's defense, from 2014 to 2020, the Vikings were not penalized very much, and they were, in fact, I think, top 6 team for fewest penalties. Last year, however, went pear-shaped. It sucked. Well, it was reined in. And if you continue to see a small amount of penalties, that always means that you have a good coaching staff because they're disciplined. A couple more to round out the show. Kirk Cousins was magnificent. There was a point in the second or third quarter where folks around me and all around the joint were chanting MVP. I earnestly did not know if that was supposed to be for Cousins or for Jefferson. I think at the end of the day it was for Jefferson because he, at the time, was offering the best first half in Vikings history via receiving yards. But when you have MVP chants for a team that's supposed to go 8-9, damn it, that's a good thing to start off with. And Cousins, who was unshackled with O'Connell in charge, Cousins also gave a sweet little speech afterward where he gave the game ball to the 2 new leaders. This can be a preview of what he's capable of. A lot of guys and gals like me spent a very long time this spring and summer talking about, the potential is there. If you get a pairing of a head coach that embraces his quarterback, unlike we've seen in 4 years with Cousins, the sky is the limit. And this also leads credence to my theory that I explained on the last show. If you dropped Cousins, Carr, Stafford, or Prescott onto the 2021 Rams, I'm absolutely convinced, and will be so until the day that I die, that they would have won a Super Bowl. Yesterday, Cousins looked like Stafford inside of a good Rams offense. What he did, the way that decision-making, him stepping into the pocket, for the most part, avoiding, having better pocket presence than when he got here in 2018. I believe that Cousins was masterful yesterday, and we shall see if it continues, because we have seen very, very good stretches of Cousins before, but you usually get one sneaky turd in there, and I hope that turd doesn't arrive until a quarter to never. Ed Ingram, he had a rocky start out of the gate. I think he gave up 2 sacks in the first half. But in the same vein that I said, the Vikings gave up 7 points, stop complaining. You can be concerned that Ingram, looked like a rookie, but this is what they do. He was going up against one of the best in Kenny Clark, and the Packers defense, we also talked about this last week, is supposed to be a top 5 unit in the NFL. That was bound to happen for Ingram. If he could have, been an all-pro dude in week 1, we would have had a show about it. However, he was a rookie, got knocked around a little bit, and we'll see how he responds. And then one sour note, the Packers will be back. If you have a short-term memory or even a long-term memory, they got their asses kicked 38-3 by the Saints last year. People tried to write the obituaries. We were like, what are you thinking? And then they ended up, after that, going, 13-3. So I have full faith and confidence, regrettably, that the Packers will figure this out. But I don't know that it will be to the degree of severity where they're another 13-win team. This Devontae Adams stuff might catch up with them. Not having Zadarius Smith might catch up to them. And I don't know that they have the oomph to go all the way to losing to the 49ers in the playoffs. I think I picked them for a regression in the sense they go about the same record as the Vikings, 11-6, and it was kind of on display on Sunday. I think they'll figure it out. Broad picture, the beginning to this O'Connell era was fantabulous, and then just everything after the game. I think Thielen said this was the first time he can remember where they were in attack mode. And think about it. That's what you've been asking for at least 2 years now, stepping on throats when the game is going well. Mike Zimmer loved his style of football that worked for a long time, where you get up 21-7 and then you take a nap. And then you let the defense suffocate. Well, the problem is in 2020 and 2021, when the defense is no longer up to the task of suffocation, then the other football team is going to waltz back into the game while you've taken your foot off the gas. Well, the Vikings did both yesterday. They continued to be aggressive. Didn't put up gobs of points onto the board, but they didn't just roll over, hand the ball off, 3 and out, and punt. They maintained good defense. Not quite to the Zimmer 2017 standard, but enough to shut down Rodgers, and then they continued to throw the football and be aggressive. The Vikings are 1-0. I don't feel great about the Eagles game because it would feel kind of too good to be true that they go 2-0 and they look like beasts on Monday Night Football. So we'll break that down Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. But this was kind of the victory lap in terms of observations, and I hope you enjoyed VikesNow. Skol, baby.